Hello, everybody. This is Angel Arts, and welcome to yet another episode of Let's Interview the Finalists for the upcoming Athenaeum Tabletop campaign. We are here joined today by Z. Welcome, Z.
Hello.
And do not let the background behind him fool you, because I'm sure the room behind you looks very familiar for those of you who have been watching Dragon Age Season 3. Z is actually Tommy's roommate. And speaking of interviews and Dragon Age Season 3, welcome, Callista. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Especially at this late at night, early in the morning for you. I appreciate that. Thank you. But again, you may know Callista from the Dragon Age Ascension campaign, where she plays Pasha. So, I will cut to the chase and let Callista take the lead from here.
I'm not actually aware of if you have been RPing or if this is your first time RPing a game. I'm not actually aware. If it is not, then what, in your opinion, makes a successful group? What makes a successful campaign?
I have RP'd before. It's actually a hobby that Tommy did get me into. So much so that's actually one of the tattoos that I have here. Yeah,
Nice.
it's one of my favorite pastimes. It's just really hard to come by. But in my opinion, the things that really make a successful group or adventuring party or whatever the system calls for, I think it does call for some diversity. Obviously, if everyone is exactly the same kind of character, it's not going to be an interesting session, because someone will say, "You want to ram down that door? Yeah, let's ram down that door." Instead of someone saying, "You want to ram down that door? Actually, it might not be a good idea. We're on high alert right now." For the people in general, I feel like as long as you can roll off of each other, if you can laugh, have a good time, even when the situation itself does get stressful, that's what's most fun for me.
What would you say is your biggest strength as a role player, and what would you say is your biggest weakness?
My biggest strength, I think, personally, is that I do always like to help the other characters at the table. Not necessarily like metagaming, where it's spoiling a puzzle, because the fun is finding out the solution to the puzzle. But it's more so just I always like to communicate with the people that I'm playing with. I like to make sure that everyone is keeping track of like their bonuses and everything, if they have any. I would say my biggest weakness, however, is the fact that I'm a very story-driven person, and I know that Athenaeum is supposed to be more of a role play, more of a story-heavy thing, but I don't like getting into combats exactly, and so even if I'm trying my best not to, occasionally there will be the thing where a little bit of me will leak out, and I'll just be like, "How about we don't smack that guard in the face?" Just a thought.
Out of all of your campaigns that you have played in, what is one memorable moment for you, and why? Why was it so special?
A Star Wars campaign that I was a part of. I couldn't figure out a name for my character for the longest time, and so eventually, the day of when the campaign started, I actually pulled up a random name generator for my character, and I swear the name generator actually popped up "Yo bruh," and so that's how I got that name. And I
Nice.
I loved that one in particular, because it shows how random these kinds of things can be and how inspiration can strike at just a moment's notice. But for a more like actually inside of the campaign thing, Tommy was my first dungeon master. We were trying to sneak through a town. I was playing a magic user, and so I lost focus for a moment, because it's just hard for me to focus when the story isn't on me sometimes, which but I hear Tommy say, "So what do you do?" And I just go, "Oh God, where are we?" He explains the gate, he explains the situation, and I go, "Oh, okay, so we're supposed to bust down the gate." And so I fire off a gigantic Eldritch Blast at the gate, like level 4 Eldritch Blast, which is a cantrip, so it's already really powerful. And then I rolled a 20 on it, and so it was a critical, so it did double damage on top of everything else, and the gate just evaporated from existence. And then sure enough, because that wasn't the plan, the people that we were trying to avoid found us. And I love that moment in particular because that helped me realize that I need to pay attention to even when it's not me on the field. And that's helped me out a lot with the other adventures that I've been a part of. It definitely helps keeps the story going, the story rolling. And overall, just especially since I was so new as a player there, it helped me get a lot of just the whole encounter helped me get a lot of experience and a lot of reason to be like, focus, this is what needs to happen.
As you know, Z, one thing that makes this campaign particularly unique is not only is your character important, but the world and universe that they come from is also very important because it'll play a large part in the story. I would love for you to please take some time to tell everybody watching, if you could sell to them, what is it about your character's world or universe that makes it unique, interesting, or just plain fun for a party to visit?
Enda's world is, at least what I'm envisioning, nothing is set in stone, obviously, but what I'm envisioning is it's a very gothic steampunk kind of world. Instead of most people wearing the bright, cheerful colors like you always see here, it's much darker. The world that I'm envisioning is I would say if you had to put a style to it, it would be Sweeney Todd without the music, because people are grungy, they're darker, but the more popular, or I should say the more higher class of the people, they tend to go like more all out with their attires, looking more steampunk, like I had said. But even the paupers, even the poor people, they do have some sort of respect for that fashion. And this is where I think Enda will stand out because of how she was raised. She wears bright colors, and so she does stick out like a sore thumb. I would say it's a very not like dingy world, but it's very musky. I would say with how constant the weather is, it's hard to see like 10 feet in front of you. You know what I mean?
As you might have noticed, several people are actually pitching horror characters. So if you were to be chosen, and if one or more people are at least originally auditioned with a horror character, how would you adapt and tweak your character concept to instead shift to a totally different genre?
As you could probably tell from the aesthetic, I am a giant fan of horror, and so that's what I pinpointed on. However, if for some reason I did have to change, there are other genres that I am perfectly okay with doing. Things like sci-fi, fantasy, mythology. I would like to, at the very least, think of myself as a very creative person. And so if Enda had to change, or if I had to completely just make her a different character, I would do my best to make sure that maybe instead of a horror element, she had some sort of cybernetic enhancement instead, that made her stand out in the sci-fi universe. Perhaps she's the one who can't control the fire spitting out of her fingers in a fantasy world. There are little tweaks like that, but you can still make Enda a very scary character, even if it's a different genre altogether. And that's what I want to go for with her, is her in her own world sticking out like crazy.
Enda is around 6 years old. In her room, would you like to describe Enda's room for us to see?
Enda's room is a very blank and void room. There are no windows, so that way she can't see the outside world. It is lit slightly by a very dim, almost dying light bulb. It's not a very gigantic room, but it's not like Harry Potter's closet either. So she does have room to walk around. She has a little train toy. Her bed is in the corner of the room, a bright shade of pink with purple sheets. And then on top of her bed, there is a singular pillow, a very thin blanket, and then, of course, her little polar bear stuffed animal. The room itself is a very not beige, but not gray either color. It's somewhere in between there. So the only shades of bright color of her room are her clothes and her bed.
Enda is in her bed, facing the wall, and suddenly she feels a breeze on the back of her neck, very unfamiliar, I would imagine.
Mm-hmm.
And as Enda rolls over, she can see little drifts of snow coming from underneath her door.
Being as this is something that Enda is unfamiliar with herself, of course, the first thing she's going to do, since she's so young, is she's going to take her entire hand and just to get a feel for it.
The snow is cold. It tingles on her skin in quite a ticklish way. And as she's banging on the floor, the door kind of creaks open a little bit. I would assume that her mother maybe normally locks her door. I would assume. However, it seems that today she's forgotten to do that. Perhaps she was interrupted, but the door creaks open, ajar, and more of the wind gently rushing in.
She immediately grabs her stuffed teddy bear off of the bed and then just holds it onto her like I'm sure you know a kid will just hold on to theirs like facing out like this. And she'll peek her head around and see what she can find.
Looking out into the hallway, the house is eerily quiet. There does not seem to be anyone around, and if Enda were to take a couple of steps out into the hallway, just at the end of the hall, she can see the front door, and it is wide open, snow blowing in, and her mother, being a blacksmith, as you said, normally you would be able to hear your mother outside clattering at the anvil. However, again, no noise. Nothing but silence.
So Enda will be putting two and two together at this point, noticing how quiet it is, and noticing how this is going to be a very, very new experience for her. And because she's excited to see new things, but scared at the same time, she'll pull her bear in front of her and she'll just go, "Snowy, what do you think?" "I don't know, it's a very scary world out there. Mommy said so." "All right, if you say so." And then she'll hold on to him as tightly as she can again, and then she'll just run just as far as she can without putting on any shoes or anything. She just runs. She makes a bolt for it.
Enda runs out of the house into presumably the first time she has ever entered the front yard, I guess you could call it. The grass is white with frost, and it does hurt her feet, but I would assume that the adrenaline and the newness of everything would kind of overwhelm that. Yeah. Snowflakes gently pirouetting from the sky as she looks upon these snow-covered trees, quite bare, but then a sudden flash of crimson. A robin darts over to a nearby branch and kind of tweets merrily at her.
She'll look at Snowy again, and she'll say, "Snowy, is this where you're from? It's so cold, but at the same time, so beautiful. Why won't Mom ever let me see this? Look at the bird. Wow."
The bird kind of coos. It does not move away. And when Enda puts Snowy up to the bird's face, it kind of it pecks at Snowy, but not in a malicious way, in a very gentle kind of like hello kind of way. And it's actually going to hop on Snowy's head and just kind of nestle down into its fur. She hears birds flying up from the trees and a strangled kind of yelp, definitely more animal than human, and she sees a stag kind of leaping through the underbrush, running away from something, or it could be Happy, who is Enda to know.
Yeah, exactly.
And as this happens, from behind her, she hears the tweeting of the robin again. However, this time it seems startled, and it flies up, one of its legs getting caught in Snowy's fur, and it starts tugging. Kind of the bear topples over, and the robin is clearly in distress, trying to get out from the predicament it's found itself in.
As delicately as she can, because she doesn't want to hurt the poor thing, she'll start like getting her fingernail under the fur and just try to like, kind of like when you have a knot in your hair, just try to get it out so that way the robin can go be with its family.
As Enda starts trying to free the robin, it does give her a rather nasty scratch on the back of her hand, but Enda seems to get the feeling it's just panicking. It is wide-eyed with fear, and it is tweeting incessantly, and it's no longer that beautiful, melodic tweeting she heard before. There are undertones of fear and pain in its little voice, and she works it free, and the robin flies up to one of the branches, looking very huffy, and kind of its feathers are all splayed out. And suddenly it looks off to the side, tilts its head, and it looks down at Enda and it tweets at her, and then it flies off to another branch and stops and looks back at her and tweets.
She'll grab Snowy with the arm that is not injured, and then she'll put the damaged hand under her armpit, so that way her clothes can try to, like, soak up if there's any blood, but also try to, like, stop if there's any throbbing to it. When she notices the bird, instead of, like, the giddy running that she was doing beforehand, she'll just, like, shakily breathing, just start, like, walking towards it instead to see if it's leading her, like, away from whatever that was.
It does seem to be leading her away from the lake. And something that Enda will notice is that the further in, because it is leading her into the forest, the further trees it seems to pick. Before it would pick a tree that was maybe a few steps away from her, but this time it's picking trees that are 3 trees away, then 4 trees away, then 5, then 6. And as she is walking through the woods, at some point she loses sight of the robin. That streak of red is no longer guiding her way.
So because she's officially lost her guide, and she recognizes, I'm in the middle of somewhere I don't know, no one is here, oh my god, she's gonna start, like, just screaming, Birdie! Birdie, I lost you. Can you come back, please? Can you please come back? She starts, like, panicking, and she's holding on to Snowy like if Snowy was a living, breathing thing, it would be suffocating right now, because she's so terrified she doesn't realize how strongly she's holding on to him. But she keeps trying to go straight, because maybe she'll run into the bird again, and that's the only way that she knows at this point.
As she is walking forward, she kind of comes across a bit of a glade, and in there is a majestic sight. A polar bear, asleep, curled up. And it does not seem to have noticed her. Despite her yelling, it has not reacted to her presence.
She thought that a bear like Snowy was just something you read in books. And so, considering how she's seeing one IRL, she looks down, and then she picks him up, and he goes, Snowy, is that your mom? Is that... Sometimes I really wish you could talk. What should we do? She's just talking to him, looking at the bear, talking to him, looking at the bear. She doesn't know what to do at this point, because a polar bear is gigantic, whereas the bird was, like, that big.
So as she keeps glancing over to the bear, maybe somewhere in her very young mind, I'm speaking, but the bear isn't moving. You know, I was yelling, it was asleep. It would have woken up. And there is once again a streak of crimson, but this time it is not the robin. From underneath the polar bear, slowly pooling out, is blood. The bear is not breathing. It has not flickered an ear since she has been in its location. This bear is very much deceased.
See, at this point, Enda will still think that's normal, because she's never been around death. She hasn't even had any pets. And so when she sees the red, she'll slowly like approach it just in case it does startle back awake. But as you said, the bear is deceased, and so because she doesn't know what this is, she'll do the crouch again, and then she'll start like just seeing if she can figure out what it is. She doesn't like or anything. She's just like playing around in it, basically, like a kid finger painting.
Okay. In the blood, or
yeah.
Okay. As you are doing this, a noise you hadn't been aware of before sort of echoes around. It's heavy panting of someone who has just been in a fight. And from somewhere in her peripheral, Enda, and she hears her mother's voice.
Enda at that point will like shoot up and then like look in the direction, and then she'll hold on to Snowy and then just bolt away. She runs through the trees, not knowing where she's going, but just she does not want to deal with her mom right now.
Your mother runs after you, calling you on Enda, please stop, Enda. And she is running, and unfortunately her longer adult legs quickly start to catch up to you. She is far more used to these woods than Enda is. She knows where all of the roots are and all of the dips in the ground. And she catches up to you, and she grips onto your arm very firmly. Maybe a little bit too firmly. Mm-hmm. As she grips it. Enda, what are you doing out here?
When she grabs onto her arm, Enda's gonna take Snowy and just start like doing that and being like, no, let go! I want to explore more! Let go of me! Let go!
And your mother is, Enda, calm down. And then she sees the scratch on the hand that is beating her. And she gets very, very serious. Her face, before stern, but confused and concerned. And this is almost a look of motherly rage as she grips onto your other hand and says, you hurt yourself? How did this happen?
I didn't do it. The pretty birdie did. Now let me go. And by the way, the hand that got the scratches on it is the same one that she was playing around in the blood in. So her hand is just caked in crimson, and so it's also staining Snowy. But at this point, she doesn't care. She just wants her mom to let go, and so she keeps yelling and screaming, "Let me go! You never let me do this. I want to see. I want to see."
Enda's mother very firmly picks Enda up in that way of when you're dealing with a tantruming child. It's just, I'm gonna pick you up. And she begins walking you back in the direction of your home. And she is just saying, this is what I told you, Enda. The world outside, it is much too dangerous. You're so small. You're so little. I should have watched you better. This shouldn't happen again, Enda. This can't happen again, Enda.
What Enda is going to try to do, because she wants her mom to let go of her no matter what the cost, is she's going to try to like lean over and just bite her mom's shoulder as hard as she possibly can.
Your mother kind of like gasps in pain. She almost drops Enda, but then she very quickly catches herself. Mm-hmm. And maybe something that Enda has only just noticed as she's kind of biting her mother's shoulder is that her mother has quite a nasty wound on her cheek. Mm. And the hammer that she uses to beat that anvil is looking redder than it normally would. And your mother just, I tried to protect you, Enda. You can't do this. And she is very quickly kind of marching with Enda back towards the house. Mm-hmm. And as Enda gets one last look at the deceased polar bear, a large black crow circles down, landing on its shoulder, and begins plucking at the flesh, gobbling down the carcass. And then it very swiftly turns its head almost looking Enda in the eyes. You could swear, but surely it can't. We're such a distance away.
Mm-hmm.
The crow caws and then takes flight as Enda's mother returns to the house and deposits Enda back in her room, firmly locking the door this time.
Mm-hmm. So after a little while of being inside of the room, now that she's been sat down and she can't move, she starts like putting the pieces together. She like sees the red, saw the red, saw the red, saw the red. And then and so just like out of a rage that Enda has never herself felt before, she drops Snowy on the ground, like not even gently putting him on the bed, just like on the ground, and then just runs up to the door and just starts banging it and just being like, "You did that to the bear! You did that to Snowy's mom! How could you do that?" And just starts just screaming and yelling and bang on the door, almost like she's trying to punch a hole through it, but she's 6.
As Enda does this, she continues this on for an hour, maybe 2, if she's spirited enough. And then, slowly, over the sound of her rage, she hears clanging. Her mother is once again working her forge. However, this clanging goes on for hours. It goes on well into the night. Your mother has never worked on a project for this long. And in the early hours of the next morning, Enda's mother comes into Enda's room, and in her hands are the manacles that Enda would become oh so familiar with. And as she kneels down and begins placing Enda's hands in them, she says, "This is for your own good, Enda. I can't be there to protect you all the time, and see what happened, your poor hand."
With the feeling of the cold metal just clanging onto her limbs as tightly as they are, she's gonna start panicking, and if it was her hands being clenched first, then she's gonna start kicking. If it was her feet first, then she's gonna start like smacking and clawing and just screaming, "No, please don't, I'll never do it again, I promise, please stop."
Your mother doesn't say anything. Throughout all of your pleas and your cries, she simply, despite no matter how hard you kick, no matter how hard you punch, she will not be stopped. Your mother's will has been decided, and as she manacles her and, looks at her handiwork, Enda's mother looks down at her and says, "You know I love you, right?"
Enda offers no response, and no direct response. She'll just reach for Snowy, and like if she can't, she'll just hold him in her hand. That's really all she can do at this point.
Your mother kind of gulps and says, "This is for your own good. You'll see that one day in the future." And she closes the door.
I never knew a life outside of that room. And without your support, I won't know anything else. So please, allow me to continue on my adventure with Athenaeum.